I think in our pursuit of research and advocacy, actually, we wandered across the four prongs that Nick also mentioned. And we were perhaps looking towards tools that could generate traffic for our website. And we came across some interesting things, and one of them was maintaining perhaps a blog. And then somebody just said that, can a think tank have its own television? Or should it have its own television, you see? And then thinking matured, and we realized that perhaps we are aiming for such a niche subject that a television with a mass coverage and ambitions of going over cable doesn't make sense at the moment. We perhaps need to catch a niche segment of the audience. And then we came across a specific type of television which has been in vogue actually, and somehow we didn't trip over it, and it was the WebTV. So just to go over its history actually, WebTV has been around for over 17 years now. During the IT bust of mid-90s, many of the laid-off youngsters actually were innovating, and some of them were with the New York Advertising Creative. And they ended up casting this online television drama, which their management refused to cater. And then a couple in the management who had faith in the innovation went to Apple and Visa, and somehow raised some venture capital, and there started the beginning of the Web TV. And then the same group actually started their own Oprah with 100,000 hits a day actually. This is mid-90s I'm talking about, you see. So Web TV has very much been there. It's just that we were not looking at it with an eye as a medium of sort of mainstream advocacy. But what was happening over here was that while people were watching these dramas or operas over the website, they were able to live post their comments as the drama was being casted. And with those live posts, the writers had the ease in shifting the plot lines due to readily available audience poll. And there was parsimony in reaching the targeted audience as well as attracting the advertisers. And tagging became much more easier over the blogs actually. And with this came the third stage of the web television phase, which is fairly known now. It's the YouTube or the Daily Motion revolution we have, and the streaming and the post-podcast that we usually do. And with this, many of the new people who did not want to spend a lockup time in gaining traffic for their own web television started establishing their channel over the YouTube and putting up their own videos over the YouTube, and that channel essentially became their own web TV. That YouTube channel became their own web TV. And by 2006, we had independent producers selling their output to web TV, so it was fairly established industry. And social media then further slashed the outreach challenges for the web TV. By 2008, it was the Hollywood that realized that web TV is here to stay. It has its own advantages, which go beyond the cable television. ABC and NBC allowed programs with niche interest, for example, the science fictions, which were self-created, self-produced, and self-financed. And Tube Filter and Revision 3 were two examples which continue to exist until today, and certainly are good examples of benchmarking your own web television against it. And by the end of the last decade, we had this International Academy of Web Television that was setting charter and norms for the web TV industry that wanted to access its niche audience, basically. And what was now starting to happen was that there was a beginning of cross-channel distribution. So those programs which were successful over the web TV, they were being picked up by the cable television. So programs graduated from web to cable. Now, how did we trip across, or how did we came across and embracing this concept actually? As with all the other think tanks which we have been discussing for the past one day, we realized that people who visit our website actually have little time to register or to read or to give their feedback to our publications. Even in case of policy brief, actually, the kind of impact we are looking at, we all know we are not being able to penetrate the way we should. But with videos, actually, and it started as a pilot, we realized that people were posting comment, and this was niche audience. This was qualified audience that was coming to watch that web TV video. You see, so they were fully capable of what we call peer review. And they were doing the peer review at a much faster pace than what we are usually used to. And it totally short-circuited the peer review process that one had to go through. And we told all the project leaders that no matter what publication comes out of your project, you need to have a video made and put on the SDPI Web TV so that one could have this faster peer review process. And this was sort of the beginnings. So the step one was to develop internal core production facility. Essentially, as I'll tell you in the clinic, doesn't cost that much money. But still, whatever it costs, we didn't have that much. But as soon as we got the IDRC TTI grant, this was the first thing that we did, actually. We hired 2 or 3 people, mid-career people, and started up engaging them with our project heads. And that's how the internal core production facility started. We synchronized the output of this web TV with our projects, essentially to let those who were our clients, those who were our development partners, we gave them a sort of an added niche that, look, we are not just giving you a traditional project report at the end. We are giving you a follow-up in the form of a television documentary. And then networking with the targeted audience, actually. So we were using the web TV now to generate traffic for our website, actually, which is what we were thirsty for to start with. The current areas of activities, we have tried to split them into 3. One is the current affairs. I will give you an example of it, and it fits in well into our advocacy role. The second is structured programs, basically. And this, of course, comes through whatever the current issues are. So SDPI participating in the Rio delegation, we need to have a structured program on that. Or any other aspect. And then it is documentaries. So any project that we finish now, you have to have a documentary of it made before the project finishes. So just raising the ambition level amongst our own researchers. So the potential of various tools that we started using, the video packages, when I say structured programs, the most popular ones were sort of triangular stories, And suddenly, the research community in Pakistan realized that web TV was a way of taking the discourse to another level. So I was giving my view, opponent's view, and third-party judgment. And if the need allows, you could have synthesis in it as well. Now, all 4 things don't usually make it in a package that you see on cable network, basically, or the prime time. But you could do it on a web TV that you are moderating yourself or you're managing yourself. And we tried this with 2 of the packages. The first was the Prime Minister's Zero Hunger program, and the second was Rio Plus 20. We realized that the cable television networks did not have the research capacity to feed into these 2 discourses which were taking place in the country. And here you had a think tank who had the output and had a channel of its own. And any media expert or any newspaper editor who wanted to pick up news on these 2 programs had to come to our TV website. We started merging the development 3.0 tools, the standard ones we see in the literature, actually, for the pre- and post-budget debate this year. So while we were presenting the research findings or impact, sort of ex-ante impact analysis on the budget, the outreach became far more easier. We didn't have to do it from our own auditorium. We were doing it sitting in the marketplaces and for the first time allowing social accountability tools to take their root in the discourse. And the advantage of a think tank managing a television was that we were ensuring inclusiveness in whatever discourse is being relayed. So you could ensure or control for the participation of various groups, basically. So we ensured that youth groups are represented in the program, women groups, minority groups are entertained. And the three things that allowed us to create a bit of diversity, the first one, to create demand through social media. So you could have one channel doing three different things at the same time. So we were live streaming a conference at one part of the country. The second was that we were doing interview with one of the ministers. And third was that we were doing our regular transmission. So you could actually use the same tool for multitasking and sending in different messages for the different niche. And then you are shaping a real-time opinion, basically. And in the budget days, we actually saw the true potential of this. People left physically coming to our seminar rooms just because we were live streaming. So this is the new challenge for us. Those who were in Islamabad, those media people who were regular visitors to our pre-budget or post-budget seminars, they didn't come now physically because they could look at it over the live streaming. So the room was totally empty, basically. So I don't know whether that was a con of it or... And then there was, you have an added pressure for change. So while I was talking on the post-budget seminar and it was being live streamed, I received an SMS from the planning minister saying, behave yourself. So you're piling up the pressure, for change, you see, in real time. Now, in terms of the cost structure, while I'll be willing to share the actual cost, this is what we're looking at. Mainly it's personnel, and number two, it's equipment. But in case of equipment, communications, operations, the thing that I want to establish is that that is a one-time cost. It's a fixed cost that one ends up earning. The 56% that we have is usually the variable cost. So you need to sustain some sort of HR, which I'll talk about. How do you sustain the web TV? Of course, one day IDRC will ask us to self-sustain the initiative. How do we do it? Three ideas. Can commercial operations be considered? There is a loss and a gain, of course. The loss is that a think tank may want to preserve its own sense of message, which may get diluted when advertising is on. The gain is that, yes, you have a cash flow ensured in sort of a pure theoretical environment. Who would be interested in a commercial scale-up? So one or two channels have approached us that it will reduce their cost of researching a topic if we give them our already researched output in form of documentaries. And this can take two forms. One could be barter agreement, where you have MOU with major channels to give us time in lieu of knowledge product. And second could be direct time buying from the leading channels, where the profit and loss will be incurred by SDPI. Currently, the way it is being done is that while, yes, IDRC support is there, but the way we are trying to institutionalize is that a specific percentage of every new project should go in the endowment of SDTV. So currently, that specific percentage is 1.5% of every project goes to meeting the variable cost of this SDTV. In terms of human resources, of course, there are challenges just like any other section of the think tank. The issue is that training a person in sort of interactive media, the average cost is around $5,000 actually. And already in this past 1 year, we have seen people getting stolen away. With the deregulation of media in Pakistan, you have competitive salaries, and they get attracted by leading channels. And thirdly, you need to have an equally good website for the television, actually. So you need a dedicated IT department for this, contrary to, of course, what we saw in the previous presentation. But in case of WebTV, IT department is needed to manage it effectively. I'll talk more about this on the clinic. So just to conclude, 4 things. This is an invitation to think tanks for thinking digitally. There's a value for money in this sort of advocacy tool, if one considers it. Sustainability of this sort of digital tool is far more easier in terms of cost effectiveness. And branding of a think tank, here's an opportunity of doing it more cost effectively. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks very much for that. Now, of course, time is against us as usual. So we'll have a few comments, questions, and then we'll break into clinics. Now, the clinics, we had different suggestions of how to manage them. One suggested, we were going to break into 3 or 4 groups, right? So one suggestion was to have each resource person spend 15 minutes at one table talking with you about issues that they presented and unpacking them a bit more, and then move to the next table and do the same with the next table. So every table would get each resource person. That was one option. The other option was to have one resource person per table and have you self-select and say, okay, I'm going to Nick's table because I like his presentation or whatever. And so, I don't know, maybe we'll throw that open to a vote. Have a think about it, but in the meantime, any comments and questions on that particular presentation?
Just a question for Vaqar on TV. Can you say a bit more about the audience? I mean, how much do you know about who's watching and what they're thinking? And who's eating your content, basically?
You can answer that while I'm now. Oh, no, wait. Okay, let's have it.
No, I think it's great hearing the integration of this web TV into your think tank activities. And as we think about being digital and opening up processes and sharing and connecting, we're mainly talking about using the web to share about research results where we already are at the results stage. I wonder if we shouldn't also go another step and talk about open data, because that's also going to change the way that we do research when we actually open up the research process before we get to the results stage. And we do have examples already of open data research projects where the researcher might have been in the field, gathered data, but then it's available and third-party researchers who were not into the field can come to it. There are many ethical questions, there are many questions of rigor and methodology, but I think we might want to keep that in mind as well.
Hi. Quick question on, from what I've heard, most of this has been essentially about a think tank reaching out. And now sort of follow on broadly from what you're saying about open data. Let's say if we were interested in building a network of people who work on cities, a network of people who work on education, how would that stuff be different? I mean, I know Enrique started off by saying, share, don't own. How do you actually operate? How would a strategy for building a network differ from the kind of stuff that you've been talking about? And does it make sense to think about developing a site, or does it make sense to work with tools like Facebook? I can see the limitations in Facebook and stuff like that. So if you could address that part of the story in some respects.
Henrique. So this is just very quick. So I actually work as a program officer with TTI in South Asia. So quick comment on Vaqar's presentation. I manage the Pakistan Institutes, but to point out that, we can't access Pakistani television often in India, and yet you can see the live web streaming of some of the events. So, I think Paul mentioned earlier about sort of geographic borders being crossed, in terms. So that's one instance. Following on from Catherine's point, I just wanted to also raise the issue of open access in terms of JSTOR and, other resources. So this is really for the panel here that, while we talk a lot about data open access, and one of the issues we face within the TTI, and for many of our institutes, it's actually open access in terms of JSTOR and actual resources in the developed world. And I know from academic communities and friends and colleagues that I think all of you should be really, and I know you do, but it's really a plea for you to kind of, we have communities in India and everything that are really lobbying for this, but they've come up against a hard wall. And the final thing, but we need to talk about regulation and states that are big brother. China as an example, India is much freer, but there is an issue about, so just to put that on the table.
Regulation is a good point. Ethiopia has just restricted the use of Skype, I think. In fact, has banned voice over IP. So if you go to Ethiopia and you want to make a phone call using the internet, it's illegal. 15 years in prison, yeah. But you can still use Skype to chat, I think. Okay, so...
No, that's okay. Okay, yeah. So how to identify audience? I think initially it was an iterative process, basically. We were trying to monitor who was posting, how many hits were there, where was the traffic coming from. So there was a team monitoring that and trying to see it initially. But later on, it became sort of a documented SOP. And so we knew that if, for example, it's a climate change program, we knew which community to tweet to or to email to before the program, before the live stream starts. But yes, initially it was sort of an iterative thing. It's always hard to get an audience to your website or WebTV or whatever it is. Regarding the open data thing, of course, the intent is good and essential, of course. But within the think tank community, I think many of us would agree we do a lot of impact assessments and collect so much of data around our countries, for example. And in the end, it somehow is, because it is commissioned research for which the data was collected, it somehow is, we need to seek consent of whoever commissioned that research. And usually it is seen that they were not open to letting this data become part of our freeware data bank. The networking idea was very nice, actually. We need to think about, of course, we know that tools like these help in networking, but how we can build sort of a thematic network around this tool or using this tool, of course, we need to think this through. This was really nice. And WebTV crossing borders, yes, it feels nice. Yeah.
We'll just answer really quickly and then go to groups. I was going to say the network issue is interesting. I mean, I think that all these tools help you to create networks, develop networks more easily. But because it's easier, it's actually more difficult to create the networks that last. Because it's easier to sign up to networks, to sign up to an email, sign up to a Twitter. So you don't really put too much attention to it. A long time ago, when you had to send letters or faxes to engage with others, you had to make an effort. So nowadays, you need to have actually a strategy to develop those. But I'll be happy to talk to you about that. On the sort of public access to information that Owen's left, but CGD has a policy on making the data they use on their research available to anybody who wants to use it and test whether what they ended up concluding in their study is right or wrong. And I would say that as a researcher of think tanks, I'd like to see the database that the TTI has. So, but basically, I think basically is the values are changing. We're expecting more openness from institutions and organizations. So we're expecting information to be open and to be available. We're expecting people to allow us to comment and to discuss and to challenge. I think the more you get people doing that, the more difficult it will be for think tanks to remain in a sort of closed space and keep others away. And if you do that, you'll be challenged. And then your credibility will suffer, your legitimacy will suffer. 30 seconds.
Okay, quickly, a tool for networked. A good one, actually, nowadays is LinkedIn. Because a lot of people are on it, it's a professional network, and actually it works really well in terms of the LinkedIn groups functionality has really come on. So if you just want a specific tool to investigate, there's lots more out there, but it's a good one to start with. Open data, CGD's data transparency policy is obviously the way to go. Also, early research findings, and a lot of the research ODI does isn't data-driven research, it's much more sort of synthesis and so on. I think having early research blogs, that kind of thing, is incredibly important. I try to encourage it, try to encourage a much more, the working paper model writ large, the idea that you start publishing early the draft findings. Finally, on open access and JSTOR, it's a scandal. It should be, yeah, what can you say?